Okay. Hello, my name is Maya Hernandez, and I am a third year molecular cell biology student. And my research mentor for this project is going to be Dr. Ho Jin Moon, who is a professor that works under the Department of Statistics and Mathematics. And the topic I'll be focusing on is the effects of different caffeine sources on college students' academic performance. Here's a quick rundown of what we'll go through. We'll cover the background, the issue, the research question, the purpose of my research, the literature review and gaps, methodology, ethics, and finally my future plans are or what I'm planning to do in the next 2 semesters. Okay, so as college students, we may understand the workload, the studying, and sometimes not getting enough sleep. This is why caffeine has become the universally accepted stimulant among college students. And research on the chemical makeup of caffeine revealed that it contains a molecule known as methoxanthin, and that's associated with enhancements in memory and information retrieval. And there have been separate studies or surveys conducted on college students that are consistent with the benefits of caffeine, as they revealed that most students actually use caffeine as a source so they could be more alert or concentrated. So then how is this an issue? If this sounds like the secrets of productivity by providing energy, well, as many of you may know, there's different types of caffeine sources. You may get it from your teas, you could get it from your coffee, soda, energy drinks, or even chocolate. However, although each provide a source of caffeine, they also have additional or they have additives that could either be beneficial or detrimental to cognitive function. For example, a common source of caffeine may be sodas, and this actually contains something called sodium benzoate that is linked to impaired memory. On the other hand, we have stuff like teas, for example, matcha, and it's associated with decreased stress and memory improvement. Overall, we're seeing that these different caffeine sources contradict what students claim to drink their caffeine for. This brings up concerns such as the differing effects of the various sources of caffeine on, let's say, cognitive function and whether it's interfering with the student's academic performance, such as benefiting them or decreasing their performance. So this brings about my research question about how does daily consumption of caffeine affect a college student's academic performance when compared to non-caffeine consumers. And there's sub questions that I want to focus on, such as are there differences in academic performance based on the caffeine sources consumed? And these are, as mentioned before, teas, coffees, chocolate, and then how does the academic performance differ based on the quantity and timing of caffeine consumption? And the purpose of my research was to target 3 different goals. And the first one was to hopefully enhance academic performance. And by academic performance, I'm referring to both the GPA of students and their individual exam scores. So it considers both long-term and short-term academic performance. And essentially, I just want to see the caffeine source that's correlated most with academic success and hopefully use that as a recommendation for students. And then the next goal is to study the effects of the caffeine crash, because as we consume caffeine, the effects start wearing off over time. So I just want to determine what time is best to drink caffeine, like right before an exam or in the morning. And then the last goal is to study the effects of caffeine, and this will just be done by comparing caffeine consumers with non-caffeine consumers. Now for the literature review, as I was searching for the effects that caffeine has on academic performance, one of the gaps that I discovered was to address the effects that caffeine has on academic performance. For example, there's a researcher by the name of Champlin, and they found that energy drinks are negatively associated with academic performance, such as their GPA. Whereas, let's say, people who consume matcha, they had improved alertness and attention span, which could possibly benefit students' performance. So overall, we're just seeing that these separate studies just focus on a singular caffeine source instead of doing like a comparative analysis between the varying caffeine sources, which is what I plan to do, just like compare which one may be better than the other. And then the second gap was determining what academic performance is. For example, there's some researchers who defined academic performance as long-term, which was done through GPA. So they just essentially looked at caffeine and GPA, whereas other researchers, they looked at the effects that caffeine has on individual exam scores. So what I plan to do in my study is to redefine what is meant by academic performance by including both of these, so including both the GPA and individual exam scores to track how well caffeine is actually helping or harming students. And then the third gap would be to account for the non-caffeine consumers and how they're performing academically, because there's some studies I found by, say, I think there's a researcher by the name of Maksud, and they mentioned reasons why some people chose not to drink caffeine, which was due to sleep disturbances and increased stress. So it would be good to use these individuals as a baseline to compare them to those who do drink caffeine. And then I didn't put it on the slides, but most of these studies were done in places outside of the US. So I just want to focus more on, let's say, Long Beach students. And that's it for the gaps. For the research methodologies, this is how I would approach the research question. So first I would start by conducting a power analysis. This was actually suggested by my professor who's going to be helping me, Horinun. And he said this is essential just to determine the sample size that is needed to have significant results, if there are any significant results. And then we would approach this by using a mixed method approach. So I plan to make a survey that has both quantitative and qualitative aspects in order to measure caffeine source, their quantity, also like GPA and individual exam scores, and then also ask other questions to address confounding variables that usually affect grades as well, such as sleep, study, what year they're in, whether they're seniors, freshmen. And then the next step would to sample and collect. So I plan to do a stratified random sampling technique, and the different groups would be done by different majors and grade level, so everyone could be included and it's like equally distributed. And then I would distribute the survey to people who are between the ages 18 and 28, and they must be enrolled in an undergraduate facility, more specifically or more likely going to be in the Long Beach area. And the next step would just to be to conduct a statistical analysis. I plan to use RStudio. I've used it in some of my biostats classes, and that's where my professor said he would help me or guide me through the process, as he is a statistics professor. And then my last step would just to be to interpret these results and answer the questions based off of what is found. Now for the ethics of my research, I will have to get IRB approval as human subjects are involved. Although this is low risk, it is still essential for the safety of the people participating in the study. And I plan to receive informed consent, so just letting participants know about sensitive topics such as stress, anxiety, and grades, so they know what they're expecting or what I'll be asking of them. And now for my future plans, so my breakdown for the next semesters. So this semester, I drafted my proposal and I decided on my faculty mentor, and I established the research question I want to focus on. And then for the next semester, which is fall 2025, I want to start designing the survey and conducting the power analysis as mentioned before. And then I'll distribute the surveys at the beginning of next semester and collect the data at the end. So it could be a whole semester long collection process. And then I'll continue my literature review or any other parts of my paper that need to be worked on. And then my last semester, I'll analyze my data, finalize any components of the project, and hopefully hear back from my peers or my mentor for any suggestions or changes I could do to my paper. And then I'll present my findings. And these are my results, my resources. Okay, thank you for listening.